This is a revision video for crude oil, alkanes and fractional distillation. Crude oil and coal are examples of fossil fuels. Another example of fossil fuel is oil. Now these things are non-renewable resources. They are non-renewable because once they have gone, we can't get any more of them because they take such a long time to form. And that time can span millions of years. Oil and natural gas are formed from the remains of animals and plants that lived in the sea millions of years ago. When they died, the animals and plants fell to the seabed and got buried in mud and sand. They became fossilized and covered in more layers of sand and mud. The pressure and the heat from the earth turned the fossils into crude oil and natural gas. Crude oil itself is a mixture of hydrocarbons. Now, if we look at this list, we need to be able to pick out the ones that are hydrocarbons. And from that, we need to know the definition of hydrocarbon. So if I split the word up, it's made from hydro, which represents hydrogen, and carbon, which represents carbon. Now, there are normally two marks for describing what a hydrocarbon is. One for saying it contains hydrogen and carbon, and the other one for saying that it only contains that. So if we look at this list, we've got here C2H8. Is that a hydrocarbon? Well, yes, because it only contains carbon and hydrogen. The next one down is H and Cl, which is not a hydrocarbon because it contains chlorine. Then we've got a C3H10. Yep, that one is a hydrocarbon. And then the last one, hydrogen, carbon, and the presence of the oxygen there means that one is not a hydrocarbon. Carbon itself is capable of making 4 bonds. And hydrogen is capable of making 1 bond. Now this is really good because it means that 4 hydrogens can bond with 1 carbon molecule. This molecule is showing methane, which is CH4. And methane is the simplest alkane. Alkanes are called saturated hydrocarbons because all of their bonds are full. And these are single covalent bonds. So you've got to remember, if it ends in ane, it's an alkane, it's saturated, and it's a hydrocarbon. And saturated means single covalent bonds. Another thing that's quite popular in exams is displayed formula. Here are the displayed formula for methane and ethane. And it just shows you whereabouts the atoms are and then what is bonded to what. So we can see here the carbon has made 4 bonds and each hydrogen has made 1. Ethane is a little bit more complicated because the carbon makes 1 of its bonds with another carbon. Now you'll notice that there is a relationship between the number of carbons and the number of hydrogen atoms in the molecule. For methane, its molecular formula is CH4, and for ethane, it's C2H6. Here is a table containing the first 10 alkanes. Now you need to be able to state their formula and their displayed formula. So what you could do now is stop the video and see if you can fill these in for yourself. I mentioned earlier that there is a relationship between the number of carbons and the number of hydrogens in an alkane. Now we can represent this using something called the general formula. And we have the number of carbons, and we represent that with the N. The number of hydrogens is 2N plus 2. So say if I have got 6 carbons, then to work out the number of hydrogens, I need to do 2 times 6 plus 2. which gives me 14. So that would mean that C6H14 is the formula of that alkane. Now, the more carbon atoms an alkane has, then the longer we say the chain length is. The less carbons an alkane has, then the shorter the chain length. Longer chain alkanes, or ones with more carbon atoms, are more viscous because their molecules get more tangled up because they are very long, and therefore there are more intermolecular forces present. The size of the molecule also affects the boiling points. The smaller the molecule, the lower the boiling point is. Now, this property allows us to separate crude oil through the process of fractional distillation. Now, what happens here is the crude oil enters the tower and is heated. Remembering that the crude oil is a mixture of hydrocarbons. So in there we've got short chain, long chain, medium chain hydrocarbons. Now, if we look at the long chain ones, now between them there are things called intermolecular forces that keep individual molecules together and stop them from floating off into a gas. The long chain molecules have many of these. The short chain molecules only have a few. Now, these forces take energy to break. The ones between the long chain take more energy, and therefore these have got a higher boiling point because you have got to put more heat, more energy in to break them apart and turn them into a gas. The short chain ones, because they've only got a few, they've got a low boiling point because they need less energy. So the first fractions to come out of the crude oil and rise up to the top will be the short chain ones because they've got the lowest boiling point. Now, at the top it's a lot cooler there, so the vapour will condense and then it will be tapped off. And it's the same for all of the fractions all the way down the tower. So as you go down, the chain length will get gradually longer as the boiling point increases. And the ones with the longest chains will be left at the bottom because they're still needing more heat to break the intermolecular forces between the molecules. Okay, so in summary, large molecules have got a high boiling point, they're not very volatile, they don't flow very easily, and they don't ignite easily, which actually makes the large ones really bad as fuels, because a fuel needs to be able to ignite pretty easily to release its energy. At the top of the tower, we generally have the small molecules. They have low boiling point, they're very volatile, they flow easily, and they ignite easily. So that means that the smaller molecules are the better fuels. And that process of fractional distillation is really, really important for us because it allows us to get the fuels that we need. So things like petrol and diesel all have come from the fractional distillation of crude oil. What you can do now is pause the video and have a look at some of these graded questions. There are some grade E ones, some grade C ones, and some grade A star ones. So have a look to see if you can do them. If you get confused by any of them, then you have to go back and watch that section of the video again.